Hello, my name is Tomasz and in this material I would like to present my idea of the game and its key elements. To begin with, I'd like to emphasize that the presented idea of the game consists of many activities and behaviors that occur in a non-linear order during the game. When presenting them theoretically, we need to present them sequentially. Therefore, I will start by discussing my attacking philosophy. The attacking philosophy, in my view, relates to scoring a goal, which is the result of the physical and intellectual effort of the entire team. For better communication with the team, I encapsulate this definition in the English word strike. In football, a strike refers to an action that started with the goalkeeper and ended with scoring a goal. By scoring a goal in this way, we can say that the team's success is the result of the cooperation of many or all the players on the field. By considering the pursuit of scoring goals in this way as the attacking philosophy, we can simplify the process of understanding the game and separating its elements. We can divide the game into its sub-moments, such as opening the game, building the game, creating scoring opportunities, and finishing. We are also able to separate team actions, starting from the goalkeeper and ending at the moment of finishing at the opponent's goal. This approach allows us to observe which behaviors and actions, whether group or individual, make up the entire team action. In each separated and analyzed action, these elements may occur in different chronological order. Thus, creating scoring opportunities can refer to attacking vertically. This is the shortest and most direct way to conduct an attack. In other words, the team notices the space behind the opponent's last line and tries to introduce the ball there. This can be achieved by passing the ball in the air or by advancing it past another line of the opponent. Such a way of playing is possible, for example, when the opponent is trying to win the ball high up the field and is aggressive in the pressing actions. However, sometimes the opponent's game plan is different. They are not interested in actively defending to win the ball. Instead, the opponent tries to control the space behind their last line and reduce its size between successive lines. In this case, one should look for widening or lengthening specific spaces within the opponent's structure. In such situation, we say that our attack is conducted using a horizontal approach. Of course, the method of managing space doesn't have to change from match to match, and it can change over the course of a single game. Therefore, utilizing specific behaviors and actions, whether individual or group, occurs during the game in a non-linear fashion and cannot be defined in terms of their order of occurrence. That's why I believe the only solution to being effective in the game is to equip players with the ability to analyze what's happening on the field here and now, and with the ability to immediately find an appropriate method of action that ensures success in the current moment, as well as to prepare for subsequent actions that will occur in the near future. I'd like to invite you to watch a video that shows how my team tries to create scoring opportunities. group actions in building up. To begin presenting them, I will again refer to two attacking approaches, direct and indirect. At this point, I'll focus on actions related to directly attacking space. As Italian coach Roberto De Zerbi said, the greater the opponent's pressure, the quicker the attack should be. When our team is opening the game from the goal or building it around the penalty area, most of our players are facing their own goal. This means that when receiving the ball, they will act both in a close position and under pressure from the opponent. Therefore, the first behavior I emphasize in my team's play relates to releasing the ball by a player in close position. Another behavior in my game idea is captured in the phrase link and sprint. This action refers to a player dropping off his position to receive the ball. In the initial phase of the action, he helps his teammate in building the play, but when in a close position, he passes the ball to a teammate whose body is facing the opponent's goal. However, his action doesn't end there. After releasing the ball, his task is to quickly occupy the frontal space. Analyzing this action, it's important to note whether the player performing it has extended the originally effective playing space. This behavior increases the amount of space in which the ball will be operated and consequently the time, as the size of the available space in football determines the amount of time available to act with the ball. Moreover, by extending the playing space, the player can draw the opponent's attention, thereby creating space behind the opponent for later use by running into it. In the case of directly attacking, an effective method is to pass the ball in the air behind the opponent's last line. Thus, in the training process, it's worth focusing on methods for individually unmarking oneself from opponent's protection. One example is unmarking oneself by running off and moving into the created space. Key elements of this type of unmarking from the opponent's protection are wide circular movement and the ability to make sudden changes in running direction. Therefore, it's important to ensure that during the development of players, attention is paid to the mobility of their hips and to utilize methods supporting explosive work of players. More complex actions used in my game idea include the involvement of a third man. This is often used to escape the pressure of an aggressive opponent. Of course, it should be noted that attacking by the pressing zone involves the use of more activities. Many actions begin with the player controlling the ball, focusing the opponent's attention. This action aims to invite opponents to apply pressure while simultaneously pulling them out of their position. A technical action worth noting in the development of this behavior is controlling the ball with the sole of the foot. As Italian coach De Zerbi states, using the sole of the foot to stop the ball impacts the opponent mentally. It provokes him to act when the pace of the game slows down and can also evoke extreme emotions. This technical element can be seen as nonchalant and may cause doubts about showing respect to the opponent, who wants to defend his value, of course. The concept of third man is already explained at the level of its definition. The opponent's pressure caused by the player with the ball attracting him results in the closure of passing lines to the partner. This happens because the pressure comes from a specific zone of actions. According to the principle of attacking the side of the pressing, the player with the ball should deliver it to the partner who is currently cut off from receiving the ball. Therefore, it's very important to find another player with an open passing line who could participate in the ball transport process, serving as a bridge. Most often, the player tasked with supporting the ball transport will receive it in a close position. At this point, once again, the action of releasing the ball in a close position becomes crucial. However, it's also worth noting another concept proposed by De Zerbi, namely the concept of following the opponent applying pressure. Applying this concept can facilitate ball reception by eliminating the opponent's pressure on the receiving player's back. In the initial phase of the process, this player is under the protection of an opponent positioned in his zone. However, moving away from the initial position allows the player to free himself from the opponent. As in zonal marking, the opponent often doesn't follow the rival. In such a situation, the player moving away from his position can serve not only as a bridge in the ball transport process, but ultimately can become the third man. The player with the ball can find another partner positioned 2 lines higher and, for example, use a diagonal pass to move the ball into that area. Ultimately, the mentioned player can turn towards the opponent's goal and receive a return pass, starting a progression in the field. The entire process of implementing the third man's action ends with increasing the pace of the play and quickly filling the available frontal space. The next action in my game idea is the Christmas tree concept, commonly known as the double six concept. I previously mentioned the diagonal nature of a longer pass that a defender attracting the opponent might choose. Such a pass aims to bypass at least one of the opponent's lines and reach a partner positioned higher in the space. Once again, this player will most likely receive the ball in a closed position. So, according to the principle of releasing it, he will need support. However, in the Christmas tree concept, this support is not provided below the line he is in, as with the third man's activity, but within the same line. Positioning a partner in the same line and playing a horizontal pass helps draw another opponent into the same line as his partner. This leads to the creation of space between them, which can be used to transport the ball another line forward. Ultimately, the ball aims to reach offensive players positioned between the opponent's defensive and midfield lines. In implementing this action, timing in the execution of 2 consecutive technical elements, receiving and passing the ball, is crucial. The player receiving the ball in a close position may or may not be under the opponent's control. If he's not under pressure, a one-touch pass is less effective as it doesn't draw the opponent out of position. In this case, it's important for the player to receive the ball, and if he does so with the sole of the foot, even better. Receiving the ball with the sole allows it to be stopped without directing the play in the next action. Attracting by receiving the ball in this way is also effective for the same reasons as attracting with the ball while carrying it. The player's decision on the number of touches used depends on interpreting the behavior of the nearest opponent and the intensity of his pressure. During the teaching process of this game concept, attention should also be given to which foot is used for passing and receiving the ball. I believe that the player executing the diagonal pass and the receiving partner should use their outer foot for this purpose. The next player, who advances the ball one line further, should use the foot closer to the ball to maintain the dynamics of the action and the ability to exploit the space created between the opponents as quickly as possible. The concepts I have presented relate to direct play, and now I will start describing those associated with a more indirect approach to competition. Before doing so, I'd like to emphasize the importance of ball circulation when the opponent is more passive, does not apply aggressive pressing, and is not manipulated by the attraction with the ball. In such cases, it is much harder to advance the ball through the opponent's lines, as opponents remaining in their zone maintain appropriate distances from each other. Therefore, our players should be capable of creating relationships that allow maintaining possession of the ball while moving the opponent's structure. The process of moving the ball aims to create a situation where one or more opponents are slow to react, creating space through which the ball can be advanced. Regardless of the structure in which our team plays, we can distinguish two methods of ball circulation. The first is perimeter circulation, and the second is circulation in which the ball occasionally enters the opponent's structure. Personally, I prefer the second method, although the first one is safer. The concept I'd like to focus on at this point is the so-called inverted fullback. The inverted fullback is a player positioned as a fullback who has a profile allowing him to function effectively within the opponent's structure. This is a defender whom I classify as a playmaker capable of creating numerical superiority in the central area of the field. Depending on the way the attack is conducted, he can perform various functions. One of them is to mimic the role of the second holding midfielder in the Christmas tree concept. However, primarily this player is tasked with operating in the lower half space, creating an additional passing line or drawing the opponent's attention, which leads to the isolation of the winger from the opponent and allows him to start individual actions through dribbling. I'd like to mention that I very much enjoy using players in this position whose dominant foot is opposite to the side they play on. This allows for additional opportunities to shield and protect the ball, which is received into the opponent's structure. An action derived from this type of ball reception is the switching play. In the case of wanting to play with one touch, the fullback can perform an individual action commonly known as the Italian trick. A decade or two ago, playmakers were mainly considered to be players in the midfield position. Today, when referring to a playmaker, it's more about the player's profile than his role. However, it must be acknowledged that the role of the game creator in modern football is mainly assigned to central defenders, who are increasingly starting the team's attack. Aggressive pressure from opponents doesn't allow central defenders to have much time with the ball, but the situation is quite different when the opponent is more passive. Central defenders then have the opportunity to explore options to be used over a longer period. It also happens that there is considerable space to exploit between them and the opponents. In my game idea, there is a principle of progression when there's a frontal space which primarily refers to the central defenders who build the play. It's worth mentioning that eliminating the space between most widely positioned defenders and the opponent's forwards allows for the use of another element in the game: attracting the opponent by extending the effective playing space. The idea is that initially, the player with the ball should quickly reduce the available space, and then his partner in the line should move towards the space in the direction of his own goalkeeper. This type of behavior is referred to in my game idea as extending the effective playing space to entice the opponent into starting the press. Most teams have a principle that triggers pressing actions when the opponent passes the ball towards his own goal. Implementing this type of space extension and passing the ball backward can influence the opponent's decision on subsequent pressing actions. However, this is only achievable if the previous action has successfully realized progression on the field. In conveying methods of indirect space attacking, the concept of squares plays a key role. It allows players to easily understand which spaces to occupy in the game and where to direct the ball. I usually present the concept of squares to my players using a specific opponent's game structure. I particularly like to use the 1-4-4-2 system because its structure allows for the identification of 3 horizontal lines and 4 vertical lines. These lines create an opportunity to identify 4 squares, which I use to illustrate to players the spaces within the opponent's structure. The first square refers to the space between the forwards and the central midfielders of the opponent. The next two squares are created by the fullback, winger, central defender and central midfielder. These spaces, in theory, are placed within the half spaces. The third square is formed by the central defenders and central midfielders. In theory, these spaces take the form of squares, but in practice they can have a completely different shape. My players learn positional play using the concept of squares, but they understand that their final shape depends on the positioning of specific opponents on the field. In advanced stages of understanding this concept, players should be able to interpret the available spaces around them without relying on information about the opponent's system or specific positions of their adversaries. The discussed space between a group of opposing players can be utilized in various ways. One way to use this space is illustrated by the first square. This space is mainly explored by the holding midfielder who plays closest to the defenders. In my idea of the game, this player is commonly referred to as the 6. Primarily, this player maintains a central position within the square's space. Thus, we can say that the space of the square is consistently occupied as the functioning of this player takes place precisely within it. The player performing the role of the 6, similar to anyone else playing between the lines, should be characterized by a high level of spatial control or scanning. Moreover, he should be able to manage his body position and collaborate with the player in possession of the ball, considering which foot will be used for passing and receiving the ball. Receiving the ball between the lines with separation from the opponent allows the player to progress in the game. This enables him to attract the opponent's attention. It is essential to note that after passing the ball to the higher position players, it's crucial to locate the nearest opponents. When creating goal-scoring situations, his assistance might be necessary and he will become one of those responsible for marking the opponents. The concept of marking in attack refers to players positioned closest to their own goal, while their teammates focus on creating goal-scoring opportunities. The task of the player executing marking in attack is to locate and cover the opponent, which prepares him for actions in case of losing possession of the ball. This concept facilitates more effective defense during an opponent's counterattack, improving its elimination. It is one of the elements of my idea of the game during attacking. Another way to use the space is illustrated by the second square. An attacking player playing as a forward drops from his initial position to receive the ball in this square. I want to emphasize once again the importance of extending the effective space of the game before dropping from the initial position. Not only does this allow for more space and time when receiving the ball, but it also focuses the opponent's attention, which will eventually follow the player. In such a situation, dropping from the initial position will be vertical. the player moving to the central part of the square's space will receive the ball in a close position and under pressure from the opponent. Ineffective execution of this process can lead to losing possession of the ball and starting a counter-attack by the opponent. Therefore, it's crucial to remember the technique of releasing the ball in a close position. When discussing with other coaches, I have heard various opinions about playing in a closed position. I have heard that the best solution for a player receiving the ball under pressure is to try to deceive the opponent and turn with the ball. In my opinion, this approach is too risky relative to its benefits. So I believe that a much smoother process is to pass the ball to a partner positioned one line lower. In the next action, the player receiving the ball will be able to make a pass beyond the last line of the opponent, and the player who initially passed the ball, after unmarking himself from the protection with a circular movement, will receive it in a frontal position towards the opponent's goal. If the entire action happens lower on the field and doesn't involve a forward, but for example a midfielder, the midfielder can receive a return pass and start progressing while facing the opponent's goal. In the training process, it's valuable to focus on methods of unmarking oneself from the opponent's pressure. One of these methods is unmarking with a circular movement. When communicating with players, I convey that I have nothing against attempts to turn with the ball in a close position under pressure, but I believe this should be an occasional action. This means it is executed so infrequently that the opponent doesn't expect it, which increases the chances of success. A similar method of using space can occur in the area of the third square, as depicted in the graphic. Despite the effective extension of the playing space by the attacking player, it may happen that the nearest opponent doesn't decide to follow him. In that case, this player will be able to receive the ball in the center of the space without opposition, just as a player who constantly functions between the opponent's lines can also receive the ball without opposition. In my idea of the game, this role is performed by the attacking midfielder, commonly referred to by me as the number 10. Thanks to the work done by the forward, focusing the attention of the nearest opponent, the attacking midfielder can operate in the space similarly to the 6, but position one line higher. Therefore, the ability to scan the space should be a characteristic feature of the player in this role. He should also be able to control his body position and move on to playing with the ball as quickly as possible, facing the opponent's goal. A player constantly operating within a specific group of opponents should manage his position so that he is always as far as possible from each of them. Just like the 6, the 10 should collaborate with the player passing the ball so that both use the correct foot for passing and receiving the ball. The the opposite of vertically dropping into the square's space is horizontally running into it. This is a solution proposed by Spanish coach Mikel Arteta, who believes that a winger should initially position himself wide and only in the next phase of the action run into the space. This type of run into space allows the player to receive the ball while running and in a body position that enables him to continue the attack towards the opponent's goal without needing to rotate his body. Introducing the ball into the center of an unoccupied space where the passer's partner is supposed to run at the same moment the ball arrives is a highly complex and difficult task to execute. This process relates to managing space with minimal control. Thus, the timing of actions is crucial for the successful execution of tasks by the players. Cooperating players must maintain constant communication, both verbal and non-verbal. I believe that the importance of using the correct foot by the passer and the receiver is key. Both the passer and the receiver should use the foot closer to the sideline on the side where these actions take place. The last way of utilizing space that I present in my game idea concerns the diagonal nature of the pass. This refers to moving the ball from one half space to the other and is most often associated with bringing the ball from the lower part of the field to the upper part. A diagonal pass over such a long distance and the cooperation of partners positioned at extreme ends allows the ball to be received in a body position facing the opponent's goal. The distance between the passer and the receiver requires support from other teammates who impact the opponents in the space between the main actors of the action. This support mainly relates to actions aimed at distracting the opponents in such a way that they are unable to block the path of the moving ball. Similar to the previously presented way of utilizing the square's space, in this case as well, both players should use the foot closer to the sidelines of the sides they are playing on. The inspiration for this type of utilization of the second square's space was Polish coach Janusz Niedźwiedź, in whose game idea the so-called diagonals function. The concept of squares closely correlates with attacking the space behind the opponent's last line. Therefore, I will also use it to present the ways in which my team tries to do this. First, I will talk about concepts derived from the square spaces. One of them relates to the use of the third man, while the other is associated with a player running through the half space. Of course, since we are talking about attacking the space behind the opponent's last line, the described concepts will relate to actions starting in squares number 2 and 3. As previously described, the third man activity can be executed when the player participating in it is able to create space behind him. This is possible only if in the initial phase of the process he effectively lengthens the playing space and draws the opponent's attention, causing him to follow. The entire process involves a high risk of losing the ball, so the key action is to release the ball in a close position under the opponent's pressure to a teammate positioned frontally towards the opponent's goal. In the case of a striker dropping from position, the so-called Italian trick can be applied, meaning the ball is directly introduced behind the opponent's last line to a partner running into the created space. In this way, the group responsible for creating a scoring opportunity uses the third man activity. The striker dropping from position can also pass the ball to a teammate positioned one line lower who has a better perspective on the opponent's goal. Only this player will then be able to introduce the ball into the space behind the opponent's last line, extending the process by one pass and involving an additional player. In such cases, we talk about the fourth man activity. Both the third man and fourth man activities can be executed in the third square space, as well as in the half spaces, for example, in the second square. A different course and conclusion have an action started by a player who consistently operates within the square space and doesn't move from another position. Receiving the ball without the opponent's assistance, this player can turn and progress on the field. After receiving the ball within the opponent's structure, he can also decide to reintroduce it outside the area occupied by the opponents. The described player performs actions in the second square referring to the half space. After passing the ball outside the opponent's structure, he can use the half space to run behind the fullback to receive the ball. This activity is called running through the half space in my game idea. It allows receiving the ball behind the fullback who is directly involved in retrieving the ball from the winger. This action also serves as a prelude to another one called multiple tens. The player running through the half space doesn't necessarily have to receive the ball, but can draw the attention of the central defender who will follow, opening space in the central corridor of the field. The ball can then be directed to another teammate running in from the second line. Focusing on the complexity of group activities cannot lead to neglecting individual activities. When attacking the space behind the opponent's last line, individual activities are crucial, such as passing the ball behind the last line, the so-called final pass, and running behind the last line. These two elements are also included in my game idea. I also draw on the knowledge shared by the Argentine coach Marcelo Bielsa, who proposed 5 ways to unmark oneself from an opponent's protection. All of these methods are present in my team's training process, and some elements are integral to my game idea. One such element occurring in the context of attacking space is the run behind the opponent from the first line. In developing this activity within the team, my goal is to focus on one key aspect. Namely, I instruct the players that the acceleration of actions and the pass should occur when the player attacking the space is in close proximity to the back of the targeted opponent. Another way to unmark oneself from protection, borrowed from Marcelo Bielsa, is to break away from the opponent in the first line. In this action, it's crucial that the pass is made at the moment the receiving player breaks away from the opponent. This action most commonly occurs in counter-attack situations when the opponent narrows the space to defend the window of the goalpost. Another solution proposed by Bielsa for attacking space is the run behind the opponent from the second line. Similar to the solution executed on the ground, in this airborne action, the acceleration of actions and the pass occur when the player attacking the space is in close proximity to the opponent and his partner, who pulls the defender out of position. The concept of multiple tens is a solution proposed by the Dutch coach Erik ten Hag. This action has already been discussed when I presented an alternative way of using the half space, different from passing the ball to a player running through it. In the concept of multiple tens, the idea is to make a movement that draws the opponent's attention. Such a movement allows for increasing the space between two opponents, into which a second line player runs and ultimately receives the ball. Let's now examine the elements of passing and receiving the ball behind the opponent's last line presented on a football pitch model. The player attacking the space behind the opponent playing in the last line expects an accurate through pass. In the first phase of the action, he controls the space and the opponent, and as he approaches, he communicates his intention to receive the ball to his partner. At the moment the ball is passed, he runs into the previously determined space. In the technique of passing the ball, it's important to impart a spin that will allow the receiving player to catch up with and control it effortlessly. When receiving the ball, it's crucial not to stray beyond the window of the opponent's goalpost, as this may limit the ease of taking a shot at the opponent's goal. The next model shows the moments of the final pass, which the team achieved by using the concept of a horizontal run into the half space, proposed by Mikel Arteta. Yet another model presents the moment the team reached by changing the area of play using a diagonal pass, a strategy advocated by Janusz Niedźwiedź. Methods of attacking space I have discussed, which my team employs, pertain to actions within the opponent's structure. To be fully prepared, it's also important to consider actions that can be useful if it's difficult to penetrate the opponent's structure. In such situations, it's essential to have solutions in your game plan that can be utilized outside the opponent's structure. The first of these solutions is underlapping and the second is overlapping. Underlapping is similar to running through the half space but occurs outside the opponent's structure. It is executed with the same purpose but focuses directly on the fullback, who is actively involved in defending the ball. Overlapping, on the other hand, is a 2 versus 1 action where the receiving player attracts the opponent by driving forward with the ball. The overlapping player remains unmarked and by running behind his teammate can receive the ball at a high level of dynamism. Performing actions outside the opponent's structure moves the team to the wide areas of the pitch. These spaces are ideal for delivering the ball into the opponent's penalty area without having to navigate through obstacles posed by players in various lines of the opponent's team. Crossing the ball into the penalty area is a relatively quick action, but presents many challenges. Firstly, it's an aerial action where the player delivering the ball must demonstrate a high level of passing accuracy and the receiver must possess a high level of spatial awareness. Additionally, the receiver must secure a favorable position to receive the ball against an opponent who finds it easier to interpret the ball's trajectory since it is airborne. A high level of quality in teamwork and technical execution makes crossing the ball into the penalty area a demanding action. In my game idea, I distinguish 5 concepts that result from the team's actions outside the opponent's structure. I want to emphasize that in the training process, I establish a hierarchy concerning these actions. The first of them is the popular cutback. I believe that the cutback is the activity with the highest degree of precision among all those mentioned. There are 2 reasons that support this view. Number 1. The player passing the ball is in close proximity to the end line of the field and the opponent's goal line. Number 2. The back pass is executed on the ground, not in the air. Because the entire process takes place in close proximity to the opponent's goal, the opposing team's players are highly engaged in their actions, performing them as quickly and accurately as possible. As a result, it will be difficult for the opposing players to precisely separate the individual actions in a given play. Maintaining the hierarchy of zonal actions while defending the penalty area, space, partner, opponent, the opposing players will quickly move to their reference points within the penalty area. This means that the players in the defensive line may have difficulty stopping, scanning their surroundings, rotating their bodies and accelerating again. Additionally, blocking the shot on goal will be challenging because the ball will be passed behind their backs. The cutback is very effective also because the ball is passed between the 2 lines of the opponents, defenders and midfielders. I mentioned the challenges for the first line of defense. As for the midfield line, we often see situations where the players in it are late in their actions and do not manage to return to the appropriate area in the penalty box. The character of the players in the second line must be tenacious enough to achieve this. They need to be box-to-box players and well prepared physically. Another challenge for the midfielders is that the players running onto the ball are behind them. While running, it's difficult to analyze what's happening behind them and control the opponents. All these reasons indicate that the back pass is relatively simple to execute and doesn't require complex cooperation between the passer and the receiver. The ball is passed on the ground with a backward characteristic. The player who is to receive it runs onto the ball with their body facing the opponent's goal. Therefore, in training sessions, we often start practicing crosses with a cutback. During training, I suggest to the players finishing at the goal that they use the foot closest to the passer. Next, we try to simulate situations where the player with the ball is blocked and needs to find another solution. In such cases, the solution is to pass the ball back along the line to a partner position in the side corridor space between the 5 and 16-meter lines. The player receiving the ball has the task of crossing it into the penalty area, aiming for the space near the near post. I'm an advocate of passing the ball to the near post because I believe that the more powerfully the ball is passed and the shorter it stays in the air, the harder it is for the defenders to judge its flight path and react appropriately. Executing an aerial duel near the near post allows for effective action by only the first defender. The ball doesn't pass through multiple defenders who might have a chance to clear it from the penalty area. The shorter the pass, the more powerful it is, making it easier to alter the ball's trajectory with even the slightest touch. Crossing the ball into the penalty area towards the near post is carried out by the player using the foot closest to the sideline on the side he's playing on. An alternative action could be to pass the ball to the same area in a second tempo. This means that the player with the ball on the foot closest to the sideline can make a feint and move it to the further foot, resulting in an in-swinging cross towards the goal. Performing a feint can halt the defenders, and when the cross occurs, they will be forced to reposition themselves. Coordinating the receiver's actions can lead to him intercepting the ball's flight path before the defender and directing it into the opponent's goal. If the player with the ball between the 5th and 16th meters is blocked and unable to cross the ball into the penalty area, he should follow the hierarchy and pass the ball outside the 16th meter line. The receiving teammate can then make a cross from this position, which in my game idea we refer to as a deep cross. Crossing the ball from a greater distance is a highly predictable pass, so we decide to aim it towards the far post areas. Despite the extended flight time of the ball, this action has its advantages. One of them is the possibility of executing a counter movement by the players running into the space. If we go back to the moment when the ball is still in the space up to the 16th meter, we can observe that the opponent's defenders are in the penalty area. When the ball is passed back, the defenders try to leave the penalty area as quickly as possible, initiating the process of moving out of it. However, if the deep cross is executed dynamically, or if one of the defenders is late in his reaction, it may result in a situation where the player running into the space attacks it while their opponent is still trying to leave it. This type of situation, known as a counter movement, is extremely dangerous as it prevents the defender from effectively defending the space. Similar to the cutback, the defender moving out of the penalty area must halt his run, take time to analyze the space, rotate his body, and start the process of running back into the penalty area to defend his zone. The complexity of these actions and the dynamics of the play can result in the defender being late in his action, potentially leading to the ball reaching the player running into the space near the opponent's far post. Additionally, crossing the ball to this area has the advantage that the ball can be directed closer to the opponent's goal line, where additional teammates are arriving. Acting as the third group in the chain of actions, these players might be perceived as the least threat and left unmarked. Moreover, they remain in an area that cannot be observed as they are positioned behind the defenders. If they skillfully utilize the opportunity created for them, they can finish the play with a goal. A deep cross is executed by the player using the foot closest to the sideline on the side he's playing on. The area of operation and the foot used by the player distinguish this action from the next one, which is a cross from the half space. The cross from the half space, also known as a basketball pass in football jargon, was introduced by the Spanish coach Pep Guardiola. If possible, the player with the ball in the wide sector of the field should try to deliver it into the penalty area as quickly as possible. However, if he feels his pass might be inaccurate or that he is being blocked, he should aim to direct the ball towards the central sector. Operating the ball in the central sector of the field allows for maintaining connectivity with all team players. The nearest space to the wide sector of the field is the half space, and this is where the ball should be directed if a deep cross is not possible. The cross from the half space is executed using the foot further from the sideline on the side the player is operating the ball. This action has the same advantages as the deep cross, mainly related to utilizing the delayed reaction of opponents leaving the penalty area. In my game idea, this pass is directed to area of the window's goalpost of the opponent so as not to push the ball receiver outside the goal frame. The cross from the half space is a much more direct action than the deep cross, so it's more important that the pass recipient has the opportunity to continue the action inside the space from which he can shoot at the goal. Consistently using the foot further from the sideline allows the opponent to get accustomed to the way actions are performed. This familiarity creates the opportunity to deceive the opponent by using a different type of the pass. If neither of these actions is possible, the ball should be directed towards the central sector of the field from where it can be transferred to the opposite corridor. Previous attempts to introduce the ball into the penalty area have led to a situation where most players from both teams occupy the areas of one sector. As a result, players remaining in the less crowded area have more space and are less pressured. Transferring the ball to these less crowded spaces allows for quick progression on the field. It's important to pay attention to the proper management of space by wingers and fullbacks. Wingers, who play the role of pass recipients when switching sides or during crosses, both deep and from the half space, should understand that when the ball is on the opposite side, their task is to move towards the center of the pitch to remain relatively close to where the ball is being passed. If a cross is blocked and the ball needs to be withdrawn and a different action taken, the winger should recognize the moment when his task is to increase the effective playing space. He should move towards the sideline before the blocked partner releases the ball to another player. If his actions start only when the second partner is ready to cross, the winger may not have enough space and time to start his run and accelerate, which could weaken the effectiveness of the action. In summary, winger on the opposite side of the pitch should, as soon as his body is oriented towards the crossing partner, tries to create space for himself which he will then attack. Such preparation increases the chances of successfully utilizing the cross when the ball reaches the area where the winger can effectively receive it and continue the action. Moving on to supporting activities, which are an important but only additional element of my training process, it should be emphasized that they are treated as components enhancing the overall effectiveness of the team's play. I try to introduce them moderately, adapting them to the profiles and skills of the selected players. The Pinocchio pass is an activity characterized by a specialized passing technique, which can be performed both on the ground and in the air. The key aspect is the ability to control two passing options, directed and surprising. This action, also known as the no-look pass, involves the player deciding on the direction of the pass before actually giving a physical cue. This makes the pass more unpredictable and harder for opponents to block. The Italian trick is an action involving the player introducing the ball with one touch while his body is in a half-closed position. This technique originates from Italy, where the ball is passed with the far foot from the central sector, giving it a specific spin. This pass is directed to the space behind the player. The preceding action creates space for the pass recipient by drawing the opponent out of position. It involves precisely passing the ball with specific spin, which can introduce additional variability and surprise in the game. Ladder is an activity proposed by Brazilian coach Fernando Diniz. This activity involves placing three players in a line and passing the ball to the next player using the technique known from the Italian trick. It is a pass that extends the path along which the ball moves. A player acting as a link who passes the ball from one partner to another may subsequently show a desire to receive the ball again and execute another action from my attacking philosophy, namely a pass with a return demand, that is 1-2. The ladder pass can be executed vertically, horizontally or diagonally. A pass with a return demand 1-2 is another action that my teams frequently use, mainly to create goal-scoring opportunities and increase the pace of the game in areas where it's difficult to create space. It's a group activity performed by two players where the ball passer shows willingness to receive it again. This allows for overcoming the nearest opponent and his defensive line. This action can be executed in horizontal, vertical and diagonal directions, with the key element being the movement after the pass. All these actions aim to enrich the team's offensive techniques and make it more unpredictable for opponents. Each one plays a crucial role in the training process, supporting players' skills in precise passing, ball reception and effective offensive play. A strictly individual activity in my attacking philosophy is dribbling. I consider it a unique form of player expression and frequently encourage players to progress in the game through 1v1 duels. It is important for a player to attempt dribbling in an appropriate situations when he sees space where he can advance with the ball, using his chosen method of deceiving the opponent. Dribbling allows a player to eliminate an opponent and create a numerical advantage in an area from which a subsequent action, such as a shot on goal, can be executed. Essential elements of dribbling that I teach in the training process include observing space and the opponent, as well as changing the pace and direction of ball control. It's crucial for a player, after overcoming an opponent in an individual duel, to quickly unmark himself and accelerate his actions after passing the opponent. An integral part of every individual duel is the use of feints, which should be viewed as a method of deceiving the opponent. The final actions presented in my attacking philosophy are scanning the space, body orientation, and receiving the ball with the foot furthest from the opponent. French coach Arsène Wenger argues that three main characteristics determining a player's potential are the ability to gather information, hip mobility, and a broad sense of explosiveness in action. The ability to observe the surroundings is key to gathering and processing information that allows for decision making on how to act in the game. Scanning the space can be divided into observing the surroundings when the player is not the recipient of the pass and when the ball is moving towards him. The concept of critical scanning refers to the situation where a player observes the space after the ball has been released from the partner's foot but is still in transit. This type of observation is particularly important for the player receiving the ball. The player controlling the ball should also be aware of the space around him. It's important that he does this at the appropriate moments. In my opinion, a player dribbling the ball should scan the space every time he lifts it from his foot while dribbling. In other words, as many touches of the ball, as many observations of the field. We have spent a lot of time discussing ways to occupy space within the opponent's structure. It's crucial for a player to find a point that is relatively furthest from all opponents in a given substructure he is operating in. However, it's equally important how a player controls his body, because it allows him to protect the ball under pressure or act frontally towards the opponent's goal after receiving the ball if no opponents are nearby. Receiving the ball with the foot further from the opponent is also crucial for ball protection. Both the player passing the ball and the one controlling it should be aware of which foot they use for these actions. The concept I have described so far pertain to the functional organization of my game concept. From this point, I will focus on structural organization. The next part of presentation will be dedicated to the formation of a line of defenders. Before I move on to this topic, I would like to emphasize that I enjoy it when my team plays in different formations. It's important to understand that specific player positioning directly correlates with the frequency of certain actions in the game. For example, the Christmas tree concept is not feasible if there is only one 6 in the central zone of the pitch. Therefore, depending on various factors, I like to compete in different formations. What gives me the most pleasure is competition where my team can function in multiple formations and is capable of consciously modifying them depending on the needs that arise at any given moment. When I think about the structural organization of my team, I consider whether I want to play with a line of 4 defenders or 3. I analyze how many midfielders I should assign to the central sector of the pitch, 2 or 3. I also consider whether 1 or 2 forwards should be responsible for scoring goals. In my mind, I'm also constantly thinking about player profiles and the composition I arrange when deciding on a specific starting 11. Unless there are other indications, I usually opt for starting with a formation of 4 defenders. I believe that a starting structure with 4 defenders offers greater reorganization possibilities. In my view, it's easier to introduce a fullback into the central sector of the pitch in this system. In a formation with 3 defenders, the wingbacks stick to the sidelines, which causes the wingers to often occupy the half spaces. There is less positional rotation and interchange of spaces between players. The way of playing in a system with 3 defenders is, however, easier to explain to players. They quickly grasp the concept of managing specific spaces and better understand their roles in positional play. This is because they don't have to constantly search for and occupy the appropriate zones, but instead operate within spaces designated by the coach. In a system with 4 defenders, wingers are less assigned to specific places and can play wider. This in turn means that the half spaces can be filled not only by fullbacks but also by one of the central midfielders. In my game idea, this task is primarily assigned to the number 10 and occasionally also to the number 8. As I mentioned, the structure in my game idea constantly changes during the competition depending on the player's activities. The first activity I will present which affects this change is the reorganization of the defense line from 4 to 3. Players can do this in two ways, depending on the profiles of the players in specific positions. The first method is implemented by the player in position number 6 and the second by the player in position number 8. The player in position number 6 is responsible for controlling the space of the first square, constantly creating a passing lane. This player is not mobile and doesn't cover spaces, but operates in a design area. Therefore, to create a line of 3 defenders, this player drops his position, filling the space between the central defenders. On the other hand, the player in position number 8 is a midfielder whose task is to fill the space from penalty area to penalty area. He is very mobile and, unlike the player in position number 6, is not assigned to a specific space. He prefers progression with the ball rather than passing, which distinguishes him from the player in position number 6. To create a line of 3 defenders, the central midfielder with the profile of 8 steps out of position and moves to one side, positioning himself next to one of the central defenders to start his actions. Despite the different role, it's crucial for the player with this profile to be able to operate within the opponent's structure, if only because he fills the first square when the holding midfielder is involved in the reorganization of the defensive line. The only central midfielder in my game idea not responsible for reorganizing the defense line is the so-called number 10. This player virtually never leaves the inferior of the opponent's structure, controls the space of squares 2 and 3, and maintains numerical superiority between the lines. The prepared model shows how to reorganize the team's structure, presenting it in a system with 3 defenders. My game idea also defines the way to fill the spaces in the side corridors of the pitch, namely the wide corridor and the half spaces. The responsibility for this task lies with 2 players who usually operate in these areas, the fullback and the winger. Players positioned along the sideline also have specific profiles. They can be players who occupy spaces or those who resemble central midfielders more closely. In my game idea, I call the former runners and the latter playmakers. When selecting a team for a match, it might happen that 2 defenders will have a runner profile and 2 wingers will have a playmaker profile. In this case, the defenders will play closer to the sideline and the wingers will occupy the half spaces. Alternatively, defenders might have a playmaker profile and wingers might have a runner profile. In this situation, the wingers will play closer to the flanks and the defenders will act as inverted fullbacks. In the last scenario, it might occur that on one side a defender will be a runner and on the other a playmaker. Similarly, on one side a winger will be a playmaker and on the other a runner. In such a situation, the team will compete in an asymmetric structure where one of the defenders creates numerical superiority in the central area of the pitch, supported by the winger. The other defender and winger will be responsible for actions outside the opponent's structure. The prepared diagram illustrates how the team's structure reorganizes from the initially adopted 1-4-3-3 system to a 1-3-1-4-2 system. The 1-3-1-4-2 system allows my team to compete with one number 6. However, if my players see the need to employ the double 6 concept, they will reorganize the structure again. In such a case, the team might designate an inverted fullback as a second number 6, and the number 10 will transition from a forward role to occupying a half space, as shown in the prepared diagram. In this setup, my team will periodically compete in a 1-3-2-2-3 system. Understanding how players with different profiles occupy spaces allows us to predict the main relationships they will form. Such a relationship will certainly be established between the central defender, midfielders with profiles 6 and 8, and the inverted fullback competing within the half space. However, one of the three central defenders doesn't necessarily have to deliver the ball to the half space. By moving into the midfield, the fullback can draw the opponent's attention, isolating the winger from the defender. An alternative action by the central defender might lead to passing the ball to the winger positions wide, which could result in an action unfolding outside the opponent's structure. If the team opts for an asymmetric strategy, it can utilize actions such as underlapping or overlapping. Conversely, if it decides to use a player remaining inside the opponent's structure, it can employ the action of running through the half space. As confirmed by the description of my style of play, structural organization is closely correlated with the functional organization of the game idea and the profiles of players involved. When discussing attacking philosophy, one cannot overlook the crucial topic of transitioning to defense after losing possession of the ball. The attacking moment is key for transitioning to defense, as it determines how the team positions itself when losing the ball. Proper actions taken during attacking allow for quicker minimization of the risk associated with losing possession. Two key actions in my game idea include offensive unity and offensive marking. Offensive unity defines the need for players positioned farthest from the ball to follow the play, even if they are not directly involved in the current situation. This means that even those far from the ball should be ready to support the play, increasing the chances of regaining possession or securing critical areas. Offensive marking involves marking the nearest opponent who, after the ball is lost by a teammate, might recover it and start a counter-attack. Therefore, it's crucial to prepare the team's basic structures for transitioning to defense. Let's now look at the diagrams illustrating my team's organization at this moment. We will focus on the group of players situated further from the ones creating goal-scoring opportunities. In the first structure, this group consists of 4 players, 2 center-backs, 1 number 6 and 1 fullback, positioned in a diamond shape. A similar situation is depicted in the structure shown in the diagram number 2, where 4 players are also involved, 2 center-backs, 1 number 6 and 1 fullback, arranged in a diamond shape. In diagram number 3, the players involved in pressing in attack are the 2 central midfielders and the 2 central backs. The difference between the structure shown in diagram number 3 and that in diagram number 4 is that in the latter, Pressing in attack involves two central backs, one fullback and one number 6. As seen, regardless of the structural organization in which my team operates, 4 players always take responsibility for pressing in attack, positioning themselves in a diamond shape. Considering the moment of transition from attacking to defending, I describe the functions performed by a specific group of players. Each group's actions are crucial for effectively achieving the goal of immediately regaining possession after losing the ball. The main principle that characterizes players' actions is maximum aggression until the opponent is relieved of our pressure. Therefore, players closest to the opponent should quickly reduce the space around him and attempt to regain possession of the ball. The group of players surrounding the center of play has the task of preventing the ball from being advanced out of the recovery zone by closing off available passing lanes. I have already mentioned the group of players involved in offensive marking. In the first seconds after losing the ball, their job is to secure the space and then delay the opponent's actions. Players positioned above the ball and closest to the player controlling it should apply pressure, while those in more distant areas should prepare for counter-pressing. If the opponent controlling the ball decides to pass backward to the goalkeeper, for example, our team's task is to continue applying pressure and gain ground. However, if the pressure applied by my players proves ineffective in the first seconds after losing possession and the opponent is able to move the ball to another sector or make progress, the goal for our team is to retreat all players behind the ball line. This concludes the presentation of my attacking philosophy. Finally, I would like to emphasize that it is crucial to implement it transparently in the training process, defining spaces and distinguishing between the internal and external structure of the opposing team. Equally important is the preparation of the training field, whose layout and spatial references will positively impact the development of the adopted style of play. In the training process I propose to my players, I use a field layout inspired by the idea of coach Pep Guardiola. I draw 2 additional lines on the football field which allow me to define the half spaces. Thank you very much for your time. This was my attacking philosophy. Tomasz Tcho.